Hello, Blake Rudas here with F64 Academy and F64 Elite, and today I want to introduce you to the new Palette Effects 2.0, and I'm going to do that with my top 5 favorite new features of Palette Effects. Now, I am kind of biased because I created the entire thing from the ground up to include all of the coding and all of the CSS and all the stuff that goes into creating a panel, but there's some really cool new things in here, and I cannot wait to show you, so let's just go ahead and hop in. The first new feature I have to talk about is just the interface, the experience of having the panel and having the panel open. So on the left, you'll see Palette Effects 1, and on the right, you'll see Palette Effects 2. Now you can just look at them from what they look like from the interface. They look a lot different. The buttons are round in Palette Effects 2. The buttons are colored in Palette Effects 2. It just looks like an overall more seamless experience. Here it looks kind of clunky. I actually used to have image files that were the buttons, but underneath you'd see a button, so it was a square image and then a button underneath. You know, these things that you just learn over time. Here we actually have CSS coded buttons, and the mouse turns into a pointer when it goes over a button. How cool is that? So if we look at, let's say like the color tab here and the color tab here on this one, you'll see that there's a few more additions to the color tab, but I'm using the real estate of the panel a little bit better. Now, if you look at the size of the panels, they're practically the same size, but I've added several new buttons to Palette Effects 2, but I've just made better use of the overall space within the panel. It's a pretty interesting new panel, lots of cool new features, and I'll dive into more of those here, but I just wanted to show you the interface and show you that things just look so much better and the interactivity is awesome. There's even a cool little hidden button right here that says help, which will give you help and aid with any of the color grading that you see in this grading palette, just to give you a refresher. It's straight out of the PDF documentation. Favorite feature number 2 is the grading palette. I have re-engineered the entire grading palette to give you more predictable effects when you click one of those color overlay buttons that's included in the grading palette. I will admit that the first Palette Effects was kind of haphazard and random. I had a bunch of different color overlays in there, but each column was random at best, okay? So this is more predictable. If you were to click on the column 1 here, this is going to overall brighten the image and give you a color overlay on top of that. So that's a cyan color overlay. This is an example of a magenta color overlay with a brightened image. This row right here is going to color dodge certain areas in the image. This is going to add a color overlay to the image that just basically lays color over the photo, and this one is going to color burn, and this one's going to add more color to the dark areas of the photograph. So if you look from left to right, each one of these buttons is more predictable. This section right here deals with highlights. This section right down the middle is going to deal with just adding that straight color overlay to the image, and then these two columns will darken the image in some way, shape, or form with that color. So it makes it a lot more predictable. I can say, okay, I want like a bluish color overlay to this image, but then I want to go ahead and warm it up in the highlights, and then even maybe warm it up in the shadow areas there. And then if I press Alt or Option and look at this, really quick color effects added to the image, and you can always increase the intensity whenever you want because now I've added fill buttons down here. So with this set to hard mix with a fill of 25%, if I need some more, just bump it up to 40% or 35% or 30%, and then you can even increase the opacity to increase the intensity of that effect. So yes, it comes with some predetermined settings for those color overlays, but everything is modifiable, even down to the point where you say, you know what, I like this warming color, but let me double click it and go ahead and change that to maybe a darker blue, and boom, there you go. My third favorite feature is the color expander. Now this is some voodoo stuff here, okay? I've always talked about using your tones to modify colors. But how many times have I ever talked about using your tones to create color where color didn't exist? It's crazy. It can actually happen. It's like magic. It's like wizardry. So I created this color expander button. In this image, you can see that the people in the photograph are very, very light skinned, to the point that their skin almost looks, when you see this, almost like a monochromatic, very white color. Where we do actually have skin tones. I do have some reddish tones in my skin. It just doesn't translate very well in the image. So if we press the color expander button, it's gonna look disgusting. I promise you, you're gonna be like, Blake, my gosh, why on earth would you do something like this? This is horrible and hideous. And you're right, it is horrible and hideous, but it is meant to use the tones in the image to create colors where colors didn't exist. So if you can see here on his face, if we zoom in here, you can see that we're adding colors in very, very bright highlight areas. Now, if the highlight is a blowout, you might receive a little bit of this kind of bluish tint there. But if it's not a blowout and it's just looks like it needs a little bit of color to it, it'll add that color to it. This is fully modifiable too. So if we look at the curve, we maybe bring up the lightness in that color and then maybe bring this down. We are now getting more natural skin color. And then we even go to the color mod here and we're really paying attention to our reds. So maybe add some more cyan to those reds, maybe a little bit of magenta to those reds, maybe remove a little bit of the yellow, or let's add a little bit of yellow to those reds and then brighten up those reds. Then we can go into the yellows and we can maybe decrease the amount of cyan in those yellows, increase the amount of magenta in those yellows, and decrease the overall amount of yellow in the yellow, and then maybe brighten it up. So now we have a more natural skin tone and some very nice vibrant color in their faces. Yes, it's probably going to be pretty extreme, but we can just drop the opacity here by either clicking on the opacity there or maybe just dropping this down to 50% using the panel. So we've added color where color did not exist. This works really well in sunsets as well. So sunsets, you might have a washed out white area in your clouds. It will add a very nice blue tone to those clouds so that you can expand those colors very well. It also works awesome for autumn foliage to really bring out the autumn foliage that would be in that image by expanding color in those yellows and highlight areas. So this can be used either straight for what it's worth, or we could bring up the opacity here, press Command or Control I on the mask, and then brush in with white anywhere we would want that color to come back, maybe on their faces, just to get a little bit of brightness in their face without actually making their eyes look like they're crystallized blue. See that? We're just adding some life, adding some color back into that skin tone very quickly and very easily. Now, it did start out very powerful and very potent, but here's the before and after. If we bump that back up to 100%, it's a little too much. So it's meant to go to the extreme so that you can taper it down. My next favorite feature are the hazes, glows, and pictorial effects. Now, in the past, I only had glows included in here. Now I've included hazes. So a glow is going to give you this contrasty kind of vibrant look, whereas a haze is going to almost give you this foggy or ethereal effect. And the pictorial effect is going to be a mixture of the glow and the haze with a soft focus blur to the image to emulate the pictorialist movement from the early 1900s. You'll find those things in the color area here and the effects area down here, and also in tone. So what this looks like is, here's our background image, and this is what it looks like with a warm glow. This is what it looks like with a warm haze. This is what it looks like with a cool glow and with a cool haze. So you can see the difference. The cool haze gives it more of this kind of like ethereal, dreamlike effect, whereas the cool glow gives it more of this kind of contrasty, almost high fashion type look. We also have black and white hazes and black and white glows as well. And we have the, let's see, the pictorial effect here, which is going to give you that soft focus look to make it look like the image is kind of shot with the soft focus lens to mess around with the highlights and the shadows in the image. Pictorial Pro Cool will give you some vignetting plus that effect. Pictorial Pro Warm, and then Pictorial Pro Black and White. These are all predetermined effects, but they're 100% customizable. So if I were to go ahead and delete all these and show you what this looks like, I'll just go ahead and hit this warm glow. Actually, let's do the pictorial effect. Let's do the pictorial warm. If I press pictorial warm, it's going to ask me how much of that glow effect do I want? Well, that's about right there. And how do I want this to affect the shadows and the highlights of the image with that glowing effect that I'm going to receive from this pictorial effect? And then I can set the mid-tone point to be more or less on that effect and press OK. It's then going to run through and give me a radial blur type of effect with a series of vignettes here. So I can turn these vignettes on and off if I see fit. I can also add a mask to this whole group of this pictorial warm and then brush in with the color black on the areas that maybe I don't want this to show up. So maybe around there, maybe around the mountain up here, maybe just kind of paint it in and get kind of painterly with how this pictorial effect is going to be on your image. And if it's too much, you can always drop that opacity here. All of these glows and hazes and pictorial effects work very similarly. They have a grouping, and in that grouping, you can edit everything. So it's not going to flatten your image, duplicate your work, or do any of that junk. It's going to do it right there in your layers stack as you work. My fifth favorite feature, if I have to end it here, is going to be on color theory. I love color theory, okay? Color theory is one of those things that I've been working on since I was a painter in the early 2000s when I really got serious about painting. And even before that, when I was a kid, just knee-high to a grasshopper painting with Bob Ross. So if you notice what I did there, I just pressed this button right here on Palette Effects 2, and what did it do? It created a color wheel for me. So at any time, you have access to a color wheel right here just at the click of a button in Palette Effects 2. Couple things about this: you can turn on and off whether you want the the gradient color wheel behind it, or you want the actual color wheel that we typically use in all the education that I produce. You can also select if you want tints of those colors or shades of those colors. And then this is the really cool part. You can pop in here and you can pop a color scheme on. So this would be a triadic color scheme. Anywhere that you see these color schemes pointing to, those would be the colors that will work together in harmony on the color wheel. If we do something like tetradic, that's going to be the split complement or the dual complement, where you're using the complement of this color to the complement of this color in close proximity, in an analogous proximity to this color's complement to this color's complement. So it's basically a four color harmony to use there. Analogous accent, this is pretty cool. You got your analogous colors and then any accent color that would be there with that. And then we have our analogous color scheme and our tried and true complementary color scheme. So if you want to know the complement at any time of a color that you have here, you can go ahead and press Command or Control T on either the color wheel or the gradient color wheel, because they're connected, they're linked. If you see that right here in the palette, they're linked. So you can just move this around and you can say, you know what? I like this color blue up here. What's its complement? Well, its complement would be that orange color down there. So I'm not moving this around. You don't want to move this around. You just want to grab on the outside and rotate it. And as you rotate it, you can select whatever color you want for that color scheme. But I've also done a couple other things. So let's say we want to select a color from here. So we get our color picker and we select this color. Okay. And now, what if we want to know what the exact complement of this foreground color is? Well, there's a button right here. If I press this button, it's going to find the complement of that color magenta. So if my foreground color is set to magenta, its exact complement is going to be that color green. If I change this to, let's say, cyan, or like this darker color cyan, and press that button again, it's going to pop open and it's going to say, okay, the exact complement of this color cyan that you chose is this peach color here. So there's quite a few things that are included in this panel that help you with color theory. These analyze palette buttons will help you tremendously when you're looking at the colors in your image, if you want to see a breakdown of what those colors look like, so that you can make more educated decisions with the color theory that you use in your images. All of this stuff that I'm talking about, all of these top 5 features that I've discussed, I go over extensively in the education that comes with Palette Effects 2. So fear not if you thought I was moving fast and you're like, whoa, this whole panel thing, it's like, looks like this crazy system. It looks a lot more convoluted than it is. I can promise you this, it does not convolute Photoshop. It makes Photoshop easier to use. It's not one of those panels that makes it harder to use. It makes Photoshop easy. It makes your color grading so simple, and you're going to learn so much from the education that's in Palette Effects. So again, my name is Blake Rudis, and this is my top 5 features of Palette Effects 2. If you need anything from me, please post it in the comments below. Ask me questions, whatever you need, I'm here for you. If you like this, please share it with a friend, like the video, and subscribe if you have not already to this YouTube channel, because I produce content like this all the time, and I'd love to have you watching it. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. I sincerely appreciate it.